Hi, this is me. Well, it was me. I'm 15 years old in this photo, and I'm also on stage in front of 12,000 people. I'm doing what I've done for as long as I can remember, playing music and leading worship at some of the largest churches in America, doing what I loved, what I dedicated my life to. It's what I still do today, except now I'm an atheist. So besides being sort of an interesting predicament, why does that matter? You may have already heard some of the logical and scientific arguments against religion, and you should look into that stuff. But that's not why I'm doing this. I know that if you're a believer, it's probably not because you took a look at the evidence, weighed the arguments, and became convinced that your particular faith is what made the most sense. You believe in it because you've seen a miracle, or felt a feeling and prayed a prayer. You've been blessed with good community of people who also believe what you do. You've seen your life improved and validated from a faith-centered worldview or a relationship with God. And because while someone might disagree with your logic, they can't argue with your experience. So I want to use my story for stuff that not enough people are talking about right now. Modern church culture and how it's emotionally manipulating people. Particularly cool church. The kind that convinces its followers that it's not a religion, that it's different and has things figured out the right way. How Christians are being mass marketed a lifestyle. But most importantly, the things and the feelings that church tries to sell us as evidence for God have a perfectly logical explanation. That's how I got here. Let's start with music. Worship music is simple, repetitive, and really easy to sing along to. It's purposely designed to engage people to participate, especially in a group setting. And that group setting's key. That's why people lead worship to begin with. Humans respond to others who lead by example, people who can motivate and influence to do as they do. When you're surrounded by people who all act and think a certain way, it's difficult to go against the grain. This is what church does to people, and it's really obvious when everyone's singing songs together. A couple of different situations made this uncomfortably clear to me, just how much church music takes advantage of this. Here's one example. I used to play for groups of students, 11 to 18-year-olds. The demographic that's usually pretty desperate to fit in and feel like they belong. So when everyone in the room started singing, there was a huge ripple effect. Everyone was doing it. Their friends, teammates, older volunteers who they looked up to. People were passionately responding to this music, raising their hands, closing their eyes. Even some of the kids who barely understood or cared about Christianity in any other capacity were praising their hearts out. I'm sure many of you have seen something similar before. It probably felt like something really special was happening. To me it did, for a long time. The really telling part was seeing how these same young people responded to a song outside of that isolated environment. It was less enthusiastic, to say the least. During a regular Sunday service in that very room, why could the exact same kids hear the same band sing the exact same song, yet not feel the need to participate the way they did last time? Wasn't the exact same Holy Spirit supposed to be connecting with them? It happened this way 100% of the time. When adults were in the room and they weren't just surrounded by their friends, and the big emotional response wasn't what everyone else was doing, they stopped. The same ripple effect happened in reverse. I could never ignore that. And I had to admit that I felt the same effect on myself. Being on the other side, I responded the exact same way during the music. I was even actively trying to get other people to feel that way. That was part of my job. But I would never feel the need to act that way outside of a group setting. I could listen to any one of the songs we played when I was alone or in my own home, and it would have little to no emotional effect on me. Even if it did, I would never feel the need to respond the way I did in church. No one acts that way outside of a group setting. I'm guessing you probably don't either, at least not very often. Besides singing or playing an instrument on stage, there's one other job I might have that most people never notice. An MD has the job of calling the shots during a live set. We perform using special headphones to hear what's going on, so the MD can talk to everyone else through a dedicated microphone. It's pretty simple. Their voice goes to the ear monitors, but not out the main speakers. It takes skill and practice to be a good MD, but more than that, you have to be able to read a room. With just a few words, an MD can extend an emotionally powerful song, start something softly and then build it up for a dramatic effect. They can call for a prayer or a hypnotic ambience underneath someone speaking. And that's where all this starts to blur the line between feelings and spirituality, between performance and manipulation. Our entire goal is to make people feel like they're connecting with God, to trigger that big emotional response and spiritual high. And we know exactly what works. We're professionals. Music is a language of emotions. It makes listeners feel a certain way. Our ears and minds connect sound to certain feelings, memories, subconscious thoughts. Believe it or not, music actually does this way more effectively than visuals do. There's some really great videos out there that illustrate this concept in film. Try watching a horror movie scene with the sound turned off. It's not scary at all. Or dubbing Benny Hill over something serious or even tragic will leave you with a video that you probably can't help but laugh at. Or play the right keyboard sound under a pastor's altar call, and everything he says will sound 100 times more profound. You see where I'm going with this. We know exactly how to use music to change people's emotions. Worship music is all about the dynamics, the build-up, that hopeful soaring climax that can send shivers down your spine or make you feel in tune with some grand act of God. The songs are written with this moment in mind, and a good band or MD can make the experience that much more engaging. We know the exact emotional journey that a crowd is about to go on. We plan it all out. These big moments make people feel connected to God through lyrics and sounds. They were a huge part of my relationship with God. And you'd be surprised just how much the band feeds off the energy of a crowd just as much as they feed off of us sometimes. People responding to music in unison, praising God together, was so uniquely validating to what I was doing. Those spontaneous moments of spiritual high that were actually carefully calculated and rehearsed made God feel real, present, personal, powerful. But as an MD especially, they were never truly out of my direct control. Yet again, I had to be brutally honest with myself about how God worked. Now whenever I look out into a crowd during these times, one thing is clear. He isn't the one doing this. I am. Artists and performers have always strived for that effect in some way. It's what the core essence of music is all about. The perfect guitar chord never changed anyone's life, but feelings and ideas do. With music, those things come across best live. Try going to a concert and feeling the energy and excitement in the room when you're connected to a musical mood, and to someone on stage expressing and communicating something they care about or believe in. I'm willing to bet at some point you'll feel those same feelings from church. If you're completely honest with yourself, it's no different. Because that's what works, what people are drawn to. When you put yourself in that environment where it's loud and crowded and emotional and there's a light show going on, it all just feels larger than life, almost spiritual. That's why churches bother with the whole fancy production. It works. As difficult as this was for me to accept, it works the same with God as it does without Him. There is one group who by nature is affected most, and they're the ones being specifically targeted in church, the emotionally vulnerable. That always includes young people, but more specifically, is anyone going through a difficult stage of life, dealing with an emotional low point and struggling to find help or answers. If your church evangelizes anything like mine, services are often planned specifically for them. Turn on your local soccer mom Christian radio station, and if you can make it halfway through whatever vanilla cliché CCM song they're playing, you should hear some verses with some really sad, self-deprecating lyrics. That's on purpose too. It's the same formula as most sermons and worship songs with none of the subtlety. Let's go back to the hypnotic ambience from earlier. When we play that stuff under a charismatic speaker, preaching or giving an invitation to become a Christian, it's always directed straight toward the emotionally vulnerable, the ones at rock bottom with nowhere else to turn, and they're usually driving this formula home hard. If you've spent time in church, you probably often hear people say something along the lines of, loving God is easy during the good times, but the hard part is learning to trust Him during the hard times. But that isn't true at all. It's completely backward. No one is looking for a God fix when life is going their way. They don't need one. The formula is broken. But when someone is struggling, these dramatic invitations are really effective. The certain situations people may be dealing with, disease, infertility, divorce, loss, are often even called out by name. So whenever a preacher, always under the calming influence of music, gives their invitation for salvation or prayer, they can be sure that someone emotionally vulnerable is going to feel like this moment is supernaturally happening specifically for them. And they'll feel that way because it is. God just didn't have anything to do with it. Remember when an invitation happens and my eyes aren't closed, my head's not bowed, I'm facing the crowd. I've seen with my own eyes literally thousands of people stand up or raise a hand or come forward the very instant they pray to be saved and become a Christian, sometimes even hundreds at once. And witnessing these broken people find hope used to feel like proof that God was real, active, and still working miracles. But when it becomes business as usual, you can't help but get desensitized to the whole thing. You realize that it's not proof. You stop ignoring the fact that all these stories and testimonies sound the same. It's always the formula. If you know someone who converted to Christianity as an adult at a time where they were not in a rough stage of life or emotionally vulnerable due to outside circumstances, do me a favor and introduce them. I've never met a single one. And that's not just God breaking people down to build them back up. It means something. These people are being duped, and so is anyone who views their testimonies as evidence for anything other than cheap manipulation. Just like I was. Thanks for watching.